Okay.
That's better, yeah.
Can you check if it's working? It should be working. Janelle?
I think they're working.
Okay. Can everybody hear me now? Terrific. The age of digital, and we still have a few glitches, but welcome to the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service panel, Create Impact. U.S. industry is a strategic fit for EBRD project needs. My name is Janelle Weyek. I'm the Senior Commercial Officer at the Commercial Office inside the EBRD, part of the U.S. office. And ours is a liaison office specifically for U.S. industry to connect with the bank and to connect with our bank's offices in country and to connect with the borrowers and the clients of the bank. Joining us today for this panel, and I would just like to say that I think this is a real coup on my part because I have all the directors from the the Sustainable Infrastructure Group inside the bank, and they're great partners for us and just very, very busy. So happy to have them here today. I'm going to just mention their names before they get started, and if they could just wave. So we have Aida Sitdikova, Director and Head of Energy for Eurasia. We have Susan Goeransson, Director and Head of Infrastructure for Europe. We have Sue Barrett, Director and Head of Infrastructure for TMEA. We have Ekaterina Miroshnik, Director and Head of Infrastructure for Eurasia. And we have Grzegorz Zielinski, Director and Head of Energy Europe. And finally, Matthew Jordan Tank, Director and Head of Project Preparation and Implementation. Now, as we go on, we do want to know what you think. So if you want to join in, you can log into slido.com and put in the code 917000, and then just go to the name of this session, and you can ask your question. However, I do want to warn you, we have a very tight agenda with 6 panelists, so we will do the best to answer your questions today. If we run out of time, please provide your name and contact details in Slido, or if my colleague Crystal Dennis up here in the front would wave her hand, bring your business card up, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So without further ado, let's move to our panel. So panelists, what is the single most important objective for EBRD to achieve in your sector and your region over the next 12 to 24 months? Aida.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here. I cover energy, so energy in Eurasia, Middle East, and Africa. And if I were to name a single objective or single target that we would like to achieve in this time span, that would be very much coinciding with the global imperative for fighting climate change. Because energy sector is a locomotive of economies. Energy sector is also one of the highest emitters, if you look at the graph. And energy sector can provide opportunities for decarbonization. So decarbonization by mid-century would be the target that we are very much aligned within the EBRD with the overall world. We have specific measurements and KPIs and metrics of how we get there. For example, by end of this year, all projects, regardless of the sector within the EBRD, will have to be Paris Agreement aligned. And it's a very robust methodology. It's a joint MDB methodology, so we take it quite seriously. We also have a quantitative target of having over half of our investments being green, qualified green, again, against very, very rigorous set of metrics. So this is what we're trying to apply in the energy sector, and the key areas how we achieve decarbonization in our countries, and they all vary. I cover the region from Morocco to Mongolia, and we have countries which are relying on coal, countries which are very rich in hydro, but they don't have hydrocarbon assets. It's very diverse. The objective there is to scale up renewables, of course, address the issue of system stability that comes with renewables, and most recently, and it's probably more of Grzegorz call because he covers the European part, It's the impact of the geopolitical turmoil on our economies, on our countries, and how energy security versus climate change, how we want to ensure that the energy security is achieved through green means, through renewables, that countries do remain committed to their targets on NDCs and Paris Agreement. And this is the overall theme. And of course, it's not just networks and renewables, it's also new technologies that I hope to be able to talk about later. Thank you.
Thanks, Aida. Grzegorz, let's maybe hear from you on this question as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to be fully aligned with Aida in terms of the main objective, and that's by far the green energy transition. I would like to break that into maybe 5 very quick points. EBRD is a bank. We provide financing for green projects, for energy transition. It's really about scaling up renewables, building up new solar power plants, building up new wind farms, and the financing for that comes, among others, from the EBRD. But financing is not everything. For those projects to get ready for construction, they need to be fully permitted. And that's one of the challenges that the authorities in our countries do face and our clients do face. So simplifying the permitting for the huge wave of new renewables that we all expect is absolutely critical for making it happen. The other element that is absolutely critical for making it happen, a part of financing, is availability of the equipment. Now, if we're talking about huge scaling up of renewables, it means much more in terms of solar panel availability needs to be available in the market. There needs to be a new construction or manufacturing capacity for solar PV panels, not only based in China, but also in Europe. So nearshoring of that manufacturing capacity is a key point. And then when it comes to new onshore or offshore wind farms, we cannot allow a situation where a project that is ready for construction with financing secured has to wait for 2 years, for new wind farms new turbines to be delivered. So we need that manufacturing capacity much closer to home. It is already closer to home, i.e. Europe, in connection to wind turbines. But when it comes to solar PV panels, that's a big challenge. And then once you have all of that constructed, it needs to be connected to the grid. So that's another challenge. The grid connection for new renewable energy capacity at the transmission level, but also in the distribution level, plus cross-border energy transmission capacity is another challenge. And then the fifth and my last point is how do we do that in the context of today's geopolitical situation, war in Ukraine, and the energy security issues in relation to gas that was defined as an absolutely key transition fuel and no longer can be seen as a safe transition fuel. So this is a technological barrier or challenge that needs to be addressed in the context of war in Ukraine. And the answer to that is really difficult. I think even more scaling up of renewable is the answer, but rather than going from green to blue to, from black to green to green, we'll really see a transition from coal directly into renewables, and that will need to happen. So that would be my 5 points on key objectives and challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Grzegorz. Sue, let's maybe hear from you as well on this one.
Yes, okay, thank you very much, Janelle. I'm on the infrastructure side, so slightly different to Aida and Grzegorz. Infrastructure for me means transport and municipal infrastructure. And just to decode my region, because TMEA is not very obvious to many people, it's Turkey and the Middle East and Africa. And I would say that the overall objective in my region, and it's a little bit broad, is sustainability. It's about supporting our clients to invest in green infrastructure, which is also smarter and accessible to as many people as possible. And that's particularly important when you're looking at municipal services. And this is very much in line with the strategic priorities of the bank to promote green, smart, and inclusive. If I were to look at the sectors within transport and municipal infrastructure, I think the key one that I would pick in this region for being a top priority is water scarcity, which is, it really is an urgent problem in this particular region, which really does see the impact of climate change on the supply or the natural supply of water. And just to give a quick plug, if anyone is interested, we have a panel tomorrow on water scarcity, and you'll hear from both the public and the private sector about the opportunities and the challenges in this particular region in terms of water scarcity. And what you'll see is that in this region there is a huge focus now on desalination as a new and, as one of the regional authorities said to me this morning, a disruptive technology for this region in terms of really creating a new source of supply, which is quite substantial and should increase water security in the region for years to come. And when we look at desal, of course, there are some small desalination plants which are being done here in Morocco and also in Egypt and some of the other countries in the region. But what the governments are now really looking at is large desalination projects. And for these, we need to ensure that they are not just securing the supply of water, but they're also sustainable in the sense that these large projects are hugely energy intensive. And so we really have to work with the government. In fact, the government is aligned with this because they're also looking at climate impacts in making sure that the energy that's supplied to these energy intensive projects comes from a renewable source. So we're seeing a lot of linkages between solar and desalination, wind and desalination. And here in Agadir, for example, there is a wind generation plant linked to the desalination plant. So this is really important. But at the same time, the sustainability issue does not really stop at the renewable energy component, because although that's enormously important, it's also important for the government to really conserve the water that they do have. So conserve the aquifers, try and find alternative methods of using water so that it's used more efficiently. And also to do simple things like rehabilitating the existing infrastructure to reduce the leakages. There's an awful lot of wastage of water that's extracted from the ground that never gets to the end user. So sustainability is a bit broader than just taking care of the energy aspects. The other thing I would say in terms of sustainability, not so much looking at climate, but in terms of the actual projects themselves and making sure that they are well structured. These are public-private partnerships, and what's needed is to really make sure that they are well structured and that they are as attractive as possible to the private sector in terms of attracting the real best industry players. International tendering is really important for governments to ensure that they get the best value for money from these very expensive but very, very important projects. And I'm sure Matthew will talk later on about his infrastructure project preparation facility. But this is something that can be extremely important, especially in this region where they may not necessarily have all of the institutional capacity that they need in order to develop these very large and complex projects. So I think those are sort of the main points. One thing I would say, and I'm happy if anyone has any questions later to give a sort of a sense of what the projects are in the region, but I don't want to sort of go through a long list of projects, is I would say that anyone who is interested in looking at these types of investment, local involvement is very important. It's really important to pair up or team up with local companies. On the one hand, because they know the environment, they're better able to sort of navigate the complexities of these types of projects within the specific environment. But that's also important for the governments in the region because they are very much focused on localization, creating opportunities and prosperity for their regions. So I think that link up between international partners who bring the expertise, the innovation, the financing with the local partners who can really benefit and the region and the areas can benefit as well is super important. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks, Sue. Katja, Tell us about your team's country priorities in your region in terms of developing projects and why.
Thank you, Janelle. And my region is Eurasia. I cover infrastructure in Eurasia. So for me, in terms of countries, priority number one is Moldova. So there are lots of refugees coming to Moldova from Ukraine, and there is serious pressure on municipal and transport infrastructure in this country. So we are working closely with the Moldovan government to increase investments in roads, in water, in solid waste. And what we are very pleased to see that there's lots of interest from donors to this type of projects. So new donors are willing to support projects in Moldova to address the issue. My second priority is Kazakhstan. With the new government in place in this country and a reform plan announced, we expect lots of business activity this year, and we stand ready to support the Kazakh government in its reform agenda. A very important theme in my region is the development of transport infrastructure in Central Asia and Caucasus. Given the geopolitical events and logistics disruptions on the northern route, now it's very important to invest into the middle corridor. The middle corridor is their route from China to Europe via the Caspian Sea. So we expect lots of investments going there into roads, ports, railway infrastructure, and logistics. And Kazakhstan is expected to play a key role in developing the middle corridor. So some serious investments into the railway infrastructure are planned there. So basically, these are the key priorities for the time being.
Thank you, Katya. Switching gears just a little bit here. Aida, tell us what's in the pipeline for renewables in your region?
Well, it's an exciting theme. Apart from the fact that it's our core business, it's bread and butter what we're doing. It's also a way for countries to, of course, to diversify their sources of energy, to ensure system stability, but also to achieve one of the lowest prices for energy for their consumers. And in that sense, I'm very pleased to report that in a number of countries in my region, we saw quite a stable regulatory setup that ultimately enabled achieving very low prices, 1.6 to 1.8 cents per kilowatt hour in Uzbekistan, a country just emerging on the world scene, with big sponsors, and I hope there will be more U.S. interest in Uzbekistan and other places, who are coming into the country and who take trust and confidence in the governments and in the environment that they'll be operating, because these are long-term PPAs. They're quite bankable, and they give comfort. Of course, without sort of false modesty, I can say that the EBRD, our modalities, we work through policy engagement, and this is where we work with the governments to establish that regulatory stuff, and actual investments, where we put money on the table to finance those renewable projects. Another third dimension, and this is the Matthews team, is the auctions, the renewable auctions that the EBRD, another part of the EBRD, is helping to design and implement. So it's one of the cheapest sources of energy. It's inherently competitive. It's certainly cleaner. There is, of course, as we all know, was a recent spike in the renewables supply chain prices and costs, solar specifically. But even with that spike, and especially assuming it will plateau at some point, renewables remain the way to go. They remain the cheapest, and they remain one of the most attractive. Of course, there are challenges coming with the system stability in many of our countries. Many transmission operators are raising the point of how much of intermittent renewable energy can a country absorb, can a system absorb. And this is where EBRD, working through because we do both private and public within the same team, where we work with state utilities on helping them to finance grid strengthening. We would love to finance a storage project, hopefully, and I hope the yes interest will be in that as well. So this is a systemic approach. And finally, just to mention in terms of renewables, I mean, we see there's already interest in the non-energy sectors, in manufacturing businesses, on greening up their production. And that's, of course, mostly driven by carbon border adjustment mechanism coming in 2026. The big notion, of course, that carbon will have a price tag on it. So it's better to be green in whatever you're producing. And that drives a big chunk of what I hope will grow of corporate PPAs or private-to-private PPAs. And we will see maybe in future, we'll see less of big IPPs that are sovereign-backed. We will see more of purely private sector renewables. So it's an exciting theme, especially in this beautiful country and then overall North Africa region, but also places like Uzbekistan I mentioned before, Caucasus are emerging, and it's really great to see that big global sustainability leaders are taking interest in small countries like Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, where nothing has been done in terms of renewables, and they come and they're ready to invest. So keep an eye open on that.
Great, thanks, Aida. Grzegorz, it would be good to hear from you on your pipeline for renewables as well, given your comments earlier.
Well, the nature of the countries that I cover is slightly different because, my team covers sort of also the advanced transition countries like the Baltic states, or Czech Republic, or Poland, and actually the advancement of renewable deployment is slightly different there. But let me start, before I talk about the pipeline, let me just highlight one very important thing that applies equally to Aida's region as it applies to mine, is how we facilitate the development of that pipeline. And EBRD is known as an institution that finances the project, but another very important element of our activities is policy dialogue. And in this respect, assisting our countries of operation in developing proper instruments to support renewables is extremely important. So renewable energy auction is this sort of well-established, tested mechanism that has been deployed already in quite a few countries in which we operate, but is yet to be deployed in some others. A good example is Serbia, where EBRD has very actively supported the preparation of the legislation and then design of the auction. That auction is expected to be launched literally in a couple of months' time, and once launched, it will provide the grant for development of a project that will need to be financed, i.e. a real pipeline for construction, for financing. But then we'll talk about the pipeline. Everyone who either means anything in the energy sector or would like to mean anything in the energy sector is chasing renewables, and that applies to the state-owned enterprises and the work that we are doing with people like HEP in Croatia, or Ignitis in Lithuania, or PPC in Greece, but also as private-owned utilities, such as Premier Energy in Romania or Polenergia in Poland, which, by the way, is the company that co-owns one of the most advanced offshore wind projects in the country. And we are absolutely confident that out of all of the countries of operations of EBRD, the first place that we are likely to see the offshore wind is actually Poland, and hopefully as soon as towards the end of next year. Then we've got all this range of private sector investors, big, small, medium size, who just want to scale up their pipeline and the portfolio of projects in our countries of operations, who come from all over the globe, including the US, obviously, but also small local developers who at one stage realize that they've got bigger aspirations. They want to become an independent power producers. And a good example of that is a company called Photon Energy from the Czech Republic, who we have supported in raising money for financing renewable projects in the Czech Republic, in Poland, in Hungary, in Romania. So they are growing into becoming some sort of a regional champion. but what we see as the next stage in this sort of more advanced countries of operation is when we get a big ticket from institutional investors like pension funds who finally will get confident enough in the regulatory system that they will start deploying big funds at scale. And that's exactly what has happened earlier this year, where EBRD supported the Dutch Infrastructure Fund, one of the leading infra investors in Europe, in the financing of the first wind farm in our region. So this is already happening, and I'm absolutely confident that we will see more and more of this type of investors coming into our region. We probably don't have enough time to talk about, other pipeline projects, what we and things like we do, green bond, sustainability linked bond, corporate PPAs with which Aida has mentioned. But let me just finish with saying that electrifications of all energy-intensive sectors only can happen if they happen in a green way. So that is going to facilitate another big wave of demand for green electrons. That means the need to invest more and more in renewables.
Well, and we clearly don't have time for everything that could be in your pipelines, but because I know they're huge and very busy. But if we take one thing away from this today, remember, call us, contact us. We can put you in touch if you've got more questions. There's a lot more to learn. So if this at least whets your appetite for what could be possible, let's move forward. But right now, I think it's good for us to maybe turn a bit. And Grzegorz, since I have you, let's follow in with you. This is an important topic for us to at least touch base on during this panel. What are you and your team working on to support Ukraine?
Look, I'm absolutely delighted to share with you, but also with you in the audience, that EBRD literally 85 minutes ago has signed its first loan since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and that loan is the liquidity support for Ukrenerga. So that's a real-life example, 50 million euro that will go out of the door very quickly to support the company that's absolutely vital for maintaining the usual life, normal life in Ukraine and keeping the lights on in the country. I'm also extremely delighted to let you know that Commissioner Dombrovskis, who was co-signing that transaction together and has supported it with the EU guarantee, has pledged another EU guarantees in the amount of 200 million euro that will facilitate further deployment of liquidity support to our clients, not just in the energy sector. I'm looking at Sue here. I leave you the pleasure of talking more about it. But in the context of war, what we really are talking about is to make sure that businesses keep going. They're able to maintain the liquidity, and we all just hope for this war to end very, very soon. And that's where the large project of reconstruction of Ukraine will start. I know it's a completely different chapter, and it probably deserves a special panel in due course, but in the meantime, there are ways of supporting energy sector in Ukraine before we get investors again confident enough to deploy their own money. Just one very quick point. As a result of the war, the demand for electricity in Ukraine has reduced by some 30-35%, which means that we do have an existing generation capacity in the country that is not being utilized. And one thing that my team and my colleagues are working on is how to monetize that unutilized capacity with potential exports of electricity to Europe to generate hard currency denominated revenues that Ukraine needs so much today.
Thank you so much for doing that. Susan, this is a good topic for you to come in right now, I think. What's your team doing in Ukraine?
Thank you. So my team covers infrastructure, which is both transport and municipal. So in Ukraine, we're working very closely with the transport, basically the key rail provider, Ukrainian Railways, as well as logistic providers. With the Black Sea ports blocked, Ukraine needs to find alternate routes, and it's critical for the rail and the logistics to continue operating, because otherwise this will have a devastating impact on trade, the economy. And there's a lot of very small SMEs and individuals who actually make crafts that they export on Etsy and through eBay using the logistic providers such as Nova Pochta and Ukraine Post Office. And so we're working with all of these, similar to Grzegorz, to provide liquidity. And as Grzegorz has signed his loan, he beat me to it. Hopefully we'll be able to provide similar liquidity support to Ukraine Railways. And I know Grzegorz has made the announcement about the European Union support, but given that this is a U.S. industry event, I know that at the donor pledging conference yesterday, the United States government pledged $500 million to support Ukraine and the countries affected by the war on Ukraine. So I think there is a lot to support us to work with our clients. In addition to transport, though, I also cover the municipalities. And, municipalities also, they provide heating, water, solid waste, urban transport, which is critical for people's lives. Some of the cities, particularly those in the West, have seen their populations increase by 25% with internally displaced people. So we are working to provide liquidities to these cities and also to see if there are maybe some small type projects that they may need to ensure services can be provided to the internally displaced people. And then finally, not just Ukraine, but the neighboring countries of Ukraine, Poland. A lot of the cities have received refugees. I know that some cities, Warsaw, when we were talking to the mayor, he said, my population has increased by 20%. Similarly, Mayor of Prague. And we are also trying to work with these cities to see if we can provide supports to see where there are services, if there's either social services with respect to housing, schooling, whatever, that we can provide through our new equality of opportunities. So this is another area that we're working with, which is not Ukraine, but closely affected to Ukraine. So thank you, Janelle.
Absolutely, Susan. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn again to Katya. Could you describe some of the key public sector projects in your pipeline and why they're important?
Yes, Janelle. So one of the sort of new themes that we have in my region, in Eurasia, is irrigation. So our board just approved a 50 million euro loan to the Kyrgyz Republic to support investments into the irrigation system. The project will cover 3 regions and will create economic opportunities for more than 14,000 people. It will reduce water conveyance losses, and it will decrease electricity consumption. We are preparing similar projects in other countries. For example, in Mongolia, in Uzbekistan, some projects are quite large. For example, the Uzbek project is expected to be about $200 million. Another theme that's also a new theme in the region is affordable housing. We are working with the Mongolian government on a project to basically construct new affordable houses for low-income households. This will be energy-efficient, climate-resilient housing units. They will be dedicated to residents in the Ger areas of Ulaanbaatar. At the moment, people who live in these Ger areas, they don't have connection to basic utilities, they don't have connections to water, don't have connections to wastewater or to district heating systems. So it will be a huge improvement in their quality of life when they move to these new housing units. So we expect about 700,000 housing units to be built as a result of this project.
Thank you so much. Sue, I ask the same question of you, public sector projects and why they're important.
Yes, of course, Janelle. I mean, I would start by saying that we have a mix of projects. So whilst I'm going to focus on some of the large, actually, public sector projects that we're working on, we do have a range from public sector to private sector. And the reason why I mention that is because one of the reasons why the public sector projects are important to us is because that's the platform that we use to engage with governments on policy dialogue. And that allows us to encourage the government and the companies that we're working with to start thinking in a more commercial way. And we provide them with technical assistance to help them restructure, to commercialize. And by doing that, it can often lead us to the private sector. So if you take the railways, for example, it's usually an integrated system, infrastructure integrated with operations. The track, the network is probably never going to transfer to the private sector, but the operations can. And so if we work with the public sector, we can facilitate that change and create investment opportunities for the private sector. And I'll talk about another smaller project at the end where the public sector investment can directly facilitate the private investment. But if I look at my pipeline for the next 2 years, it's slightly different from Katya's. We have in the past financed some fairly sizable irrigation projects here in Morocco, actually, and also in Egypt. But looking forward over the next 12 to 18 months, maybe, what we have in the pipeline in terms of sort of significant projects are actually in urban transport, in expanding metro systems in key cities. So this delivers on e-mobility and it delivers on climate mitigation. So these are very important projects. They're city-based and they allow the city to focus on improving the quality of life for citizens, not just in terms of their ability to move around more effectively, but trying to create modal shifts, so to reduce congestion, to reduce noise and air pollution. So this is why they are particularly important. And actually, each of the 3 projects I'm going to mention, they're also projects under our Green Cities program, which you'll hear more about later on in this discussion. And so they're part of the greening and the making the city smarter and more inclusive. So the first one I want to mention is Istanbul. It's obviously one of the largest city in Turkey, and here we're working on a project to expand the existing metro system. It's been ongoing for quite some years. It's a very sizable program that the city has in order to improve its urban transport in the city. And to give you sort of a scale, an order of magnitude, the project size that we're looking at is 360 million, and EBRD would provide 100 million to the city. And you may be sort of interested to know that it's not all about the construction. Anybody who's interested in the services, these all come with very sizable supervision, construction, engineering type contracts of the order of 5 to 10 million, this kind of thing. So there's the construction, but there's also the services that go with that, and any technical assistance that we may provide to help with the commercialization or whatever, the Green City Action Plans, or whatever sort of technical support we provide to the cities. Similarly, in Ankara, we have another metro project there, again of similar order of magnitude to Istanbul. This one is 300 million, and again, we're providing 100 million. And on these projects, we work very closely with other IFI partners. And I should have said the implementation of these projects, because they're public sector, it follows our public sector procurement rules, which means that we insist that the projects are competitively tendered according to EBRD rules. So you can find all the information on our website if you're interested. You can see what's coming up, and you get the opportunity to see when the procurement notices are advertised by our clients, so that if you're interested, you can participate in the tenders. And then the third and final large project on the metro side is the Cairo Metro, which we're hoping to sign in the coming weeks. This one is larger. It's around 500 million, and we're co-financing with the European Investment Bank, but very similar in terms of its priority and objectives for the city of Cairo. And this particular project was the trigger project, which allowed Cairo to become a member of our Green Cities network. So very important for the city in terms of being able to work with a strong partner like EBRD to set itself on a sort of a clean and green and sustainable pathway. Just one final smaller project I wanted to mention to illustrate the point that I was saying about public sector facilitating private sector. We're also working with Egyptian National Railways, which is an existing client, and they've asked us to provide 50 million as part of a 100 million project to construct a rail link to a dry port, which Matthew's team is doing the preparation on. And it's something that's going to be very important in terms of making that investment, that private sector investment, both bankable but also sustainable in terms of making sure that the freight goes to that terminal, that dry port terminal, through a green mode of transport rather than the freight being delivered by truck. So I'll leave it there, Janelle. And
great, thanks, Sue. And before we go to Green Cities, we are going to speak to that because it's a really, really amazing program. We've touched a little bit on public-private partnerships. Katya, I'm going to start with you and then go to Matthew. What about your PPPs in the pipeline?
Yes, thank you, Janelle. It's a great question, and I have to say I'm very excited because PPPs are very important in Eurasia. Infrastructure needs are huge. There is lack of public sector funding for these infrastructure projects, and private capital will play a significant role in plugging the funding gap. Among the countries where my team is working, probably Uzbekistan is the country for this and for the coming years. It has more than 100 projects in the PPP pipeline. The first one, Namangan Wastewater Treatment PPP, was tendered last year. The preferred bidder was announced, and the concession agreement was already signed. So, the Uzbek government is doing it very quickly, very fast. That project was, for about $100 million in capex. And the projects in the pipeline, in the Uzbek infrastructure pipeline, they're different. There are smaller projects, there are larger projects. Some of those projects are very large, like $2-3 billion, in terms of capital expenditures. And we are helping the Uzbek government. We're advising on some of those PPP preparation. Again, Matthew's team is doing that. For example, Tashkent-Samarkand Road PPP is under preparation. This project is about $2 billion in capital expenditure. Is going to be a toll road. So very exciting, and I would really recommend U.S. companies to follow Uzbekistan very closely, to follow this PPP pipeline. There will be lots of opportunities, for investors and for advisors, in the coming years.
Great. Matthew, take it from here.
Great. My mic's working. Good. It is. Thanks, Janelle. And I just wanted to say it's, I come after everyone's spoken, and I think I kind of have the easiest job in the world. It's been a lot of great information, and the colleagues, are really doing all these great financing for our countries. But the role that I have in the bank is essentially the team that's the setup mechanism. So all the engineers work under my team. We do the sort of nuts and bolts of what is eventually financed, which is about 100 projects a year. So it's a tremendous amount of sort of work to prepare these, but also to make sure that once we make the investment, it's sustainable in the sense that it works. It provides impact. So part of what my team does is indeed, as it's been referenced, a project preparation dedicated sort of effort, what we call a facility. We started about 5 years ago, combining what we do in infrastructure with renewable auctions, which was mentioned. It's about 40 different assignments with government. So it's government advisory. We're on their side of the table so that they can prepare these tenders in a balanced way that conforms to the needs of the private sector. And ultimately, the goal is to have a lot of good competition with bona fide bidders who are serious. We found that unless you prepare things really robustly with experienced advisors, international investors who have to outlay substantial amounts to prepare proposals, they won't come unless they feel confident that this is a real, well-prepared, well-thought-through project. So that's what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. We've got 6, if my numbers are correct, that are already not only awarded but reached financial close. So it's a lot of work, but there's a really healthy pipeline behind that. Let me say, in addition to all this work of bringing in the international advisors, supervising them, the sort of 4th P in the public-private partnerships behind that are people. And what I mean by this is not only the recipients, the users, but also the people in the governments who are the ones who are tendering out these projects. They need to understand, deeply what they're getting into. These are 20, 25, 30-year long contracts. They need the capacity to be a bona fide partner on the other side of the table. So we do a lot of work on sort of not only learning by doing, so that they can go through this once, twice, 3 times with us, but also just dedicated training. And we have deep sort of PPP certification training so that they can become real practitioners. I guess in terms of projects I would highlight, indeed that dry port PPP program in Egypt is something that's one of them is already closed. We've got a second one coming. And I should say, I was just in Egypt 3 or 4 weeks ago. They want to do numbers 3 and 4 as well. So this is effectively a program of PPPs in dry ports in Egypt. It's a great sort of green play as well because there's that modal shift from trucking over to rail to move the containers in and out of the country. It's digital because there's going to be digital customs clearance, which is a big step from stamping papers in and out at a maritime port. So there's it's a win-win for everyone. The other thing, I guess I would say, what if you'd ask, kind of what's next? We've got this up and running PPP program, the facility. The next step is really to localize this, to create what we call national project preparation facilities. So countries that are deeply committed to bringing in the private sector, we're accommodating that by saying, okay, fine, we will provide you with some of the upfront funding you need, but frankly, we'd like you to contribute the other half. So we want you to dig into your budgets to prepare projects alongside of us, sort of on a matching basis. So we started this, and we're really promoting it quite actively now. We started it in Greece, which is interesting. A year and a half ago, we've already got 7 PPPs up in full preparation in just 15 months. That's a huge sort of step up from sort of 20 PPPs over 5 years across the entire EBRD region. 7 in Greece alone in 15 months. So we're going to Egypt. We're going to Uzbekistan. I hope there are more. Another country just approached me yesterday afternoon about this idea. And I think I really feel confident. This is the way to go. Localize it, build up their capacity, bring in dedicated resources and teams on the ground. Hopefully, a lot of national PPP experts which it can build up. That's the way to scale this thing, because they can each do 10 or 15 PPPs. Do that across the region, and then you're talking about moving the needle globally on closing the infrastructure gap. So.
Thanks, Matthew. Oh, go ahead, Katya.
Yeah, just wanted to add, it's critical to localize and help them build capacity, because like in Uzbekistan, with more than 100 projects in the pipeline, you need to build this capacity. And all the sectors, there are so different sectors like dormitories, schools, or, water, wastewater, irrigation, district heating. So they cover almost all infrastructure sectors, of course, roads, in their pipeline. So you need to build this capacity locally. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Very good points on all of that, and thank you so much. I am going to move on to the Green Cities, really a landmark program in EBRD with municipalities active across, I think, all EBRD's countries of operation. 50%, I think, in your region alone, Susan. So what are some key projects your team are working on in the Green Cities program?
So first of all, for people who are interested in Green Cities, there will be an event tomorrow at 10:30. So I would encourage you to go. You'll hear more about the Green Cities program. For me, why we like the Green Cities program is because we know climate change. If you're going to do decarbonization, cities are going to be big players. 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions are generated in cities. 70% of the infrastructure that's vulnerable to climate change, it's in cities. So you need to work with cities. I'm fortunate enough that there's 56 green cities. Roughly half of them are in my region. And I think the reason it has resonated so well with cities is because it combines finance, policy, and capacity building to help cities identify, benchmark, and prioritize what actions and investments they want to make. So where we see the key challenges right now are 2 sectors that are really tough to abate. One is heating, and the other one is transport. So we see a lot of investments working with cities as they try to promote more public transport, have this modal shift away from cars to public transport to make transport a service. And so we're looking at, forms of e-mobility, electric buses, other forms of, more groundbreaking, such as hydrogen, so on and so forth. But transport, and here also, as my colleague Sue mentioned, electric forms of transport, such as not just electric buses, but also investing in metros, investing in trams, electric trolley buses. So this is a big area for us. And the other is heating. Heating is a very tough area to abate, but what we're seeing is a great amount of innovation, and we signed this loan several years ago in Banja Luka. It was a biomass district heating. Right now we're exploring solar district heating in the city of Pristina, heat pumps in the city of Sarajevo. In all of our cities, recognizing as they need to address heat, they're looking to make their buildings more energy efficient. And here, I mean, I know because we're talking to industry, you know, digitalization across all these sectors is so important. And particularly with, we're looking at energy efficiency in buildings, looking what we can do with digitalization. So I think there's a lot happening in the municipal space, and we're there to support our cities. And I will give the floor back to Janelle.
Well, actually, since I have you, tell us a little bit more about green transportation or municipal infrastructure projects in your pipeline. Any specifics you can give us?
Okay, so actually on transport, as I was saying, you know, most of the sectors, if you look at in their greenhouse gas emissions, they've started to find ways to decline. Transport is the one sector where it's increasing. And so in my team, we're trying to do two things to address transport. On the municipal side, it's, as I just mentioned, you know, decarbonization through electricity, through metros, trams. But the other thing we're looking at is the concept in BRTs, I should mention as well. We just are assigned to bus rapid transport, which is a cheap form of a metro in Skopje. But also the concept of transport as a service. So looking to see that, you know, can you have, you know, sort of from the metro can be the bulk of the system, but then have micro-mobility. And here, my colleagues all across the table in infrastructure, we're trying to find ways to work with micro-mobility providers, which is sort of, if you're going to say disruptive technology. And here I'm talking about the likes of car sharing, and bike sharing, as well as e-scooters. These are areas that I think are going to all affect how cities are designed. And when you talk to mayors now, a lot are talking about the 15-minute city, where you can get everywhere you need to go within 15 minutes by, you know, various modes of transport. But the other area I wanted to talk about is also long-distance transport. And one of my regions is the Western Balkans. And this is an area where historically I think the reason you've seen so much discord is because of the very challenging geography. So we're trying to promote connectivity through roads and rail. And given that roads, there's a concern always with roads, and as my colleague Aida had mentioned about Paris alignment, what we can do to ensure the greening of roads. So there's a lot of policy dialogue we're doing with the governments, and one of the key things we're doing is ensure that when roads are designed, first that they're designed to address any climate change, so they can withstand floods, extreme weather events. But the other thing is, what is the country doing to promote e-mobility? You know, if you talk to a logistics or a transport provider, and you say, why aren't you converting to electric buses? One of the concerns they always raise is that the infrastructure is not there. So when we're working with our clients to design these roads, we are always saying, what can we do to ensure that there are electric charging points in place? And this is an area on the electric charging points that, because we work so closely together, and I think what you're going to see in the infrastructure area is more cross-cutting projects. My colleague Grzegorz and I are actually working together on an e-charging project, which is very innovative, working with the private sector. So these are some of the things that we're working on. So thanks, Janelle.
Thank you. And I'd like to hear from Sue on that same topic, please.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. Listening to Sue, it makes me sort of realize the diversity across our countries of operation, because the priorities in the region I'm covering are actually quite different to the ones that Sue is in some respects, not in every respect. I mean, for me, what's important from a strategic perspective in terms of greening, it's about developing sustainable programs and projects which are replicable and scalable. And that doesn't necessarily have to be with EBRD financing. If we provide the capacity to the cities or our clients, they can do things themselves or with other partners. But of course, we want to support them in the long term, because we do see ourselves as long-term partners. So to give a sort of a slightly different flavor on some of the strategic things we're doing on the green side, developing green transportation and municipal infrastructure. On the transport side, a sort of a very good example, I think, is something we're doing in Turkey. It's not quite there yet. It's still a sort of work in progress. But we're working with the European Union on a maritime decarbonisation programme. And we're working together with the Turkish Ministry of Transport. And what this will do, it will provide grant financing from the European Union to blend with EBRD financing to really encourage decarbonisation in the maritime sector by encouraging them to ports, public sector, private sector, even cities, to develop projects which are promoting new technologies, innovative technologies which will help to decarbonize the maritime sector, which is very important for Turkey given its strategic location and the amount of coastline that it has. So to give you an example, we're looking at e-ferries with some of the coastal cities. They're very keen to introduce this as a mode of transport to clean up their coastal areas. With some of the private port operators, we see potential opportunities to do things like introduce technology like cold ironing. Now, of course, this is not new across the world, but for Turkey it is relatively new, so it will be encouraging them to sort of catch up, if you like. And there's also some interest in shipbuilding, in building hydrogen-fueled ships, and this is something else that could easily fit under this decarbonisation programme. And what we're hoping once we kick this off is that if there's a good level of demand, and we think there will be, that actually we can consider a second phase. But that's obviously getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but it's sort of one of the things that we're looking to do. Continuing on that maritime theme, the EBRD signed up to the One Ocean initiative earlier this year. Our president was there. She signed up on behalf of the bank. And this is really about ramping up investments in sort of anti-pollution, preventing pollution, particularly plastics. And it's very much an issue, again, for sort of coastal cities and sort of sea areas. And in signing up to that initiative at that summit, we also signed an agreement very directly relevant to this, and it was one of Matthew's initiatives, which was to sign up a contribution agreement with the government of Tunisia to help them develop a wastewater treatment PPP in the city of Gabas, which is on the coast, and this will help them to reduce the pollution in the coastal area. And Turkey is also experiencing a lot of problems with seawater pollution, and so the maritime decarbonisation programme and this one sort of fit very nicely together in terms of helping to really improve the water, the seas and the oceans, and making them less polluted. Of course, I can't ignore our Green Cities programme. It's just as much a flagship in this region as it is in Sue's region. It's not as prevalent, and the reason for that is that we do still see a high degree of centralisation of the provision of municipal services. So we don't have the decentralised environment in terms of cities being more independent, both financially and in terms of setting their own priorities and implementing projects. So it has been a bit slower, and how we're doing it is we're working top-down. So I mentioned some of those big metro projects in Cairo, in Alexandria. This is another place where we had a sizable metro project last year, and these have become the trigger projects for our Green Cities programme in those two cities. They're national projects, they're sovereign projects, but we're actually working alongside those with the cities of Alexandria and Cairo to help them develop Green City action plans, which, again, put them on that pathway to being green, smarter and inclusive, and set out the investment priorities and also the policy measures. And we're having to work very closely with the Ministry of International Cooperation and the line ministry of those governorates and cities to make sure that those investments are implemented and the programme is treated as a strategic programme, because this is exactly what it is. And in Turkey, Jordan, those countries are much easier because they do have the decentralised structure for municipal services, and we have a number of green cities in both of those countries, and they're extremely important, just as they are in Sue's region, and it's something that we're quite excited about because it's a region where green cities can continue to grow. And wherever you go, whichever city you talk to, they always want to be an EBRD green city.
Can I just make one point on that? Is I think the beauty, we think also of the Green City Action Plan, and I think where you've got a city is, as my colleagues have said, there's a huge infrastructure gap, and what can we do to bring in private capital? And one idea is that we're exploring across all our cities is, can we work with our Green City Action Plan and what we're doing to help cities use that as a basis for either a sustainability linked or a green bond. And I think this is really exciting, particularly as it is bringing in new capital for cities.
And just one final point.
Real quick.
Real quick. Matthew was talking about dry ports earlier on, the 6th October dry port in Egypt, which Matthew's team developed. We financed it. That was the trigger project for 6th October City.
So I know we're getting close to time. I did mention that we had a packed agenda. There is so many opportunities for both U.S. companies and other companies, either in partnership with U.S. companies or on their own, to do business with EBRD and work on EBRD projects. And so you'll note that one of the things we did here was not so much talk what has happened, but what's in the pipeline. And so from a planning and business development perspective, I hope we've caught you early I'm going to ask one more question. We're not ignoring your questions in Slido. Please give us your business cards if we can follow up. If I can ask you with one call to action, if this has even interested you at all, contact us. Crystal and I are there for U.S. companies to help answer any questions, connect you with anybody. Obviously, the people here in this panel are happy to connect with you at any time. But let me just ask one thing, because this is pretty critical. We've talked about green, we've talked about clean tech, we've talked about digitalization kind of on the edges. Digitalization is a big new topic. It's been there for several years, but now really a focus. Aida and Matthew, can you in a minute each, talk about your key technologies that you're focused on? Because let's face it, the U.S. has a lot of value propositions to offer in this space. So Aida, you quick first, followed by Matthew.
I'll be very quick. Just green hydrogen as a theme. It's been considered sort of the hype, but it is becoming a reality. We're looking at financing projects in this part of the world, actually. So, of course, there are issues. You have to ensure that the cost structure makes sense, that hopefully green hydrogen will follow the renewables trajectory, in a sense how quickly it becomes mainstream. There's also the end on demand creation. And this is where we see not just the transport and heating that Sue and Sue described, but also hard-to-abate sectors in steel, fertilizers, in cement industry. So the opportunities for green hydrogen in the overall global decarbonization effort are huge. There will be green hydrogen economy. It will be a big paradigm shift. We will have to burn something that is not fossil fuel. EBRD is very committed to it. We would rely, of course, on technology and on expertise. We're already working with major developers on the renewable side, trying to build the interface with the electrolyzer manufacturing and then the offtake. And this is, I think, where we could do more. This is a very promising energy vector. The financing structures are being worked out, but it will be pretty much resembling what we do in renewables. We just did an innovative green bond in Egypt, 130 million.
Aida, I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry, and Matthew, okay. Literally 1 minute. Wrap us up.
Okay. Well, there's sort of three things that come to mind. I would agree with you on green hydrogen, but I would having just visited the fantastic Uarzazat solar complex, massive concentrated solar. Actually, I think modular concentrated solar, smaller scale, and it can be used to produce hydrogen. It's coming. I think it's real. The second, I would say, there has to be a big push in desalination. Desalination, combining that with solar again. You can see where this is going. It's all these kind of crossover things.
Bringing that clean tech, that green, right. The digitization.
And that's right. And
right.
then the digital, the final thing is, again, we talked a lot about e-mobility a moment ago. You can't do all of these kinds of mobility solutions without digital. That is the way you deliver this through apps, et cetera. So, I mean, digitalizing all you can transport, that enables the green solutions, and I think that's a big, big technology. It'll continue.
Great, thanks, Matthew. And thanks so much to the panelists. And we've really pushed out a lot of information. Thanks to the people in the audience. Any questions? We'll be here for like 5 minutes, then we've got to clear out the room for the next session. But thank you so much, panelists. Let's give you a quick round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, Janelle.